I used to think the worst part of fall was the tidal wave of pumpkin spice lattes flooding every cafe menu. But that was before Karen stormed into my life, armed with a leaf blower, a thirst for control, and an inexplicable vendetta against my yard. There's nothing quite as humbling or infuriating as waking up to find your neighbor has decided your lawn is the perfect dumping ground for a crispy, chaotic explosion of orange and brown foliage. Yes, you read that right. Someone actually weaponized leaves against me. And that someone was Karen. What began as a petty act of leaf-based aggression quickly spiraled into full-blown suburban warfare, transforming me from a mild-mannered homeowner into a battle-hardened general in the Great Autumn Leaf War. When I first moved into our quaint, tree-lined neighborhood, it felt like a dream. The kind of place where dogs wag tails at strangers, kids zoom around on bikes without helmets, and parents wave lazily from their porches with coffee mugs and casual warnings. It was pure postcard perfection until I met Karen. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was an HOA-obsessed tyrant in pastel sweaters and designer gardening gloves. Her two life missions? Maintaining a lawn that looked like it had been airbrushed into existence, and enforcing neighborhood rules with the intensity of a medieval inquisitor. Armed with a clipboard and a glare that could melt vinyl siding, Karen stalked the sidewalks like a hawk, ready to pounce on violations. Weeds between bricks? Strike 1. A garden gnome 2 inches too tall? Strike 2. Fallen leaves? Unforgivable. At first, we exchanged polite nods and brief greetings over our shared hedge. But it didn't take long for her micromanaging mania to surface and shatter any illusions of suburban harmony. One crisp October morning, as I sipped coffee on my porch, I watched in disbelief as Karen barked orders at a landscaping crew. She was directing them to blow every last leaf from her yard, straight into mine. I laughed, assuming it was a misunderstanding. Surely no one would do that on purpose. Spoiler alert, she would. Later that day, heading out for a jog, I stepped into a sea of leaves that stretched in a suspiciously perfect line from Karen's edge of the property into my previously leaf-free zone. My jaw dropped. I looked up and there she was, standing triumphantly on her porch, sipping tea, her designer sunglasses glinting in the sunlight. She gave me a smug wave, turned, and went back inside. That was the end of neighborly goodwill. Still, I tried the diplomatic approach. After raking for hours, I walked over to her pristine white picket fence to discuss things like adults. But Karen didn't do adulting. She cut me off mid-sentence and launched into a condescending lecture about neighborhood pride, curb aesthetics, and something ludicrous she called leaf wars. It became crystal clear, reasoning with her was pointless. The next morning, the situation escalated. I opened my front door to find a massive pile of leaves strategically stacked against it, trapping me inside like I was in some kind of autumn-themed horror movie. It took 15 humiliating minutes to dig myself out, while Karen watched from her porch, sipping a smoothie and smiling. That was the moment something snapped. Fueled by frustration, pettiness, and a deep yearning for justice, I hatched a plan. If Karen wanted leaf wars, I'd give her the war she asked for. But not just any retaliation. Oh no, I'd return the favor using her own weapon, a leaf blower. Only I wasn't gonna blow the leaves back onto her yard. I was gonna blow them into her house. Petty? Yes. Dramatic? Extremely. Satisfying? Oh, absolutely. So, I bought the most powerful leaf blower I could find. One with warning labels that read like something you'd see on fireworks or chainsaws. I practiced in my backyard, accidentally launching patio furniture and alarming the neighbors, who I assured with a wave that everything was totally fine. Enter Oliver, my best friend and self-appointed co-conspirator. Oliver, a man with an unhealthy love for spy movies and conspiracy theories, turned my petty plan into a full-blown tactical mission. He suggested night vision goggles, camouflage, and even a zip line. We spent late nights plotting Operation Leaf Storm, complete with code names, fake maps, and more giggling than two grown men should admit. And while Karen continued to grow bolder with her smug glances and aggressive foliage assaults, she had no idea that every fallen leaf was one step closer to her downfall. Finally, the night arrived. Under the cover of darkness, Dressed in head-to-toe black gear purchased from a sketchy military surplus site, Oliver and I prepared to launch the ultimate suburban counterstrike. Karen had no idea what was coming. Armed with the mother of all leaf blowers and a righteous sense of suburban justice, Oliver and I crept through the shadows toward Karen's perfectly polished palace. Each step crackled beneath our shoes like autumn itself was cheering us on. My pulse raced with a blend of anxiety, excitement, and the overwhelming realization that I was about to escalate a petty neighborhood feud into legendary status. Was I really about to turn a leaf war into a suburban myth? One look at Oliver's overly eager grin told me, absolutely yes. Standing at the edge of Karen's pristine lawn under a moonlit sky, I felt like a character in a low-budget spy film. Oliver crouched beside me in full tactical gear he'd ordered online. Gear that was 100% unnecessary but, according to him, essential for mission authenticity. Tactical pants with extra pockets, he said, were the backbone of every successful revenge plot. Who was I to argue with pocket logic? He began unpacking our gear with military precision, whispering ridiculous code names like Eagle Eye and Alpha Leaf into our walkie-talkies. Even though we were barely 20 feet apart, I tried to remind him of this, but he waved me off with all the seriousness of someone defusing a bomb. And honestly, his excitement was contagious. I found myself whispering back like we were infiltrating a top-secret facility instead of, well, leaf bombing a neighbor. Each step across her lawn sounded like thunder. At one point, Oliver froze and raised a clenched fist, a silent signal for danger. I halted, confused, as he pointed toward a garden frog statue on Karen's porch. Motion detector, he whispered. I blinked. It's a decoration, I muttered, but he was already tossing handfuls of leaves toward it to test his theory. Nothing happened. He shrugged sheepishly. It looked aggressive. Eventually, we made it to her porch. My heart was pounding. Oliver silently handed me the beast of a leaf blower, a machine so overpowered it looked like it was built to launch rockets, not clear yards. I flipped the switch. Whoosh! The motor roared to life, nearly sending Oliver tumbling into Karen's rose bushes. We froze, sure we'd been busted, but the night remained still. No lights, no movement. It was go time. I took aim at the massive pile of leaves we'd strategically gathered, right outside Karen's slightly ajar front door, a detail we had noted during a previous stakeout. With a deep breath, I pulled the trigger. A thunderous gust erupted, and a glorious wave of autumn leaves surged through the doorway like a leafy tsunami. It was beautiful. Leaves spun in the air like nature's confetti, settling onto antique furniture, curling across rugs, and sticking dramatically to glass surfaces. For a moment, it was everything I had hoped. Chaos, poetry, vengeance. Oliver began filming, muttering excitedly about uploading it as a revenge vlog. But then, thud, a heavy, unmistakable sound came from upstairs. We froze, eyes wide. She's awake, I whispered. Panic surged. We bolted off the porch, diving into the nearest hedge for cover. Oliver, of course, choosing the prickliest bush in the entire neighborhood. I grimaced as sharp branches clawed at my face, but we held our breath and stayed low. Seconds later, Karen appeared, storming down the stairs in a satin robe and fury. She screamed, a sound so shrill it probably cracked glass in 3 zip codes. Her arms flailed wildly as she flung leaves off her furniture like they were venomous spiders. It was better than I imagined. Oliver shook with silent laughter, rattling the hedge so hard Karen spun toward the window. We ducked fast, hearts pounding, the scent of roses and regret thick in the air. Then something we didn't expect. Karen didn't scream into the street. She didn't march outside like a banshee of HOA doom. She picked up her phone. She's calling backup, Oliver whispered, eyes full of alarm. Backup? What does that even mean in a leaf war? I asked. We didn't have to wait long to find out. Moments later, headlights cut through the dark like judgment itself. A white SUV screeched to a halt in her driveway, emblazoned with the Neighborhood Watch logo. Out stepped none other than Mr. Thompson, a retired HOA enforcer known for snoring through meetings and lecturing teens about curfews. Oliver choked back a laugh. That's her backup? But our amusement vanished the moment Mr. Thompson whipped out a flashlight with the intensity of a prison floodlight. Karen pointed wildly at the bushes, our bushes, like a manic air traffic controller directing incoming aircraft. "She knows," Oliver hissed. We were seconds from being caught. "Distraction," I whispered urgently. "Now." I sprang from the hedge like a possessed scarecrow, leaves clinging to my clothes, hair, and dignity. I ran full tilt down the street yelling absolute nonsense. Something about raccoons invading the compost bins, I think, drawing Karen and Thompson's attention away. It worked. As they stared, dumbfounded, Oliver seized the moment. He stealthily rolled across multiple lawns, slipping away like some discount Navy SEAL. Once we were both safely home, covered in scratches and leaf debris, we collapsed onto the porch, breathless and laughing like lunatics. The mission, though slightly chaotic, had been a success. Operation Leaf Storm was officially legendary. Chaotic had succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. The next morning, I awoke feeling smugly triumphant, until my phone buzzed with an avalanche of messages. A mixture of excitement and anxiety flooded through me as I scrolled through our neighborhood social media group, which had exploded overnight. Dramatic accusations, conspiracy theories, and wildly inaccurate eyewitness accounts flooded the feed. One neighbor claimed to have seen masked bandits wielding industrial-strength leaf blowers. Another insisted it was an alien retaliation against HOA regulations. As hilarious as it was, I quickly realized the prank had escalated far beyond harmless mischief. The HOA had called an emergency meeting for later that day, attendance mandatory. Panic replaced amusement as Oliver and I exchanged anxious texts. Somehow, Karen had mobilized the entire community against us. Before I could fully process the disaster unfolding, my doorbell rang. Standing there, clipboard in hand, was Karen herself, her expression smug. She leaned in and whispered, "You started a war you can't win." Then, with a theatrical spin, she marched triumphantly off my porch. Her arrogance ignited something deep within me. Oliver, appearing out of nowhere, clapped a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry," he declared dramatically, pulling on his tactical gloves like a soldier preparing for battle. "This isn't over yet. We've got allies." My heart skipped a beat. "Allies?" Oliver smirked and nodded toward several neighbors watching curiously from across the street. "Trust me," he whispered. "Karen isn't as popular as she thinks." And just like that, our ridiculous suburban feud had evolved into something far greater, an actual neighborhood rebellion. This was no longer just about leaves or revenge. It had become a battle for suburban dignity, fought not just with leaf blowers but with wit, determination, and a coalition of disgruntled homeowners ready to stand against the tyranny of Karen's lawn perfectionism. The HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a space typically reserved for book clubs and overly enthusiastic yoga sessions. Today, however, it resembled a courtroom trial. Stern-faced neighbors sat in hushed rows, whispering accusations. Karen, seated at the front, gripped her clipboard like a judge's gavel, her expression a picture of righteous indignation. Oliver and I shuffled nervously into the packed room, feeling the weight of judgmental stares. Even the normally friendly Mrs. Pepperton glared at us over her knitting needles, shaking her head as though she had never expected such disgraceful behavior from those nice young men down the street. Karen stood abruptly, clearing her throat with dramatic intensity. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice trembling with exaggerated outrage, "we are gathered here today to address an unprecedented crime against our community standards. Acts of aggression involving yard debris, covert nighttime operations, deliberate sabotage of property aesthetics." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Heads nodded solemnly, as though Karen had just described high treason. Oliver leaned toward me and muttered, "Who knew leaves were a weapon of mass destruction?" I elbowed him, but even I had to admit, Karen's theatrics were nothing short of impressive. She continued, passionately detailing the events of our midnight leaf invasion with the gravity of a true crime documentary narrator. She spoke of her emotional turmoil, dramatically describing nightmares in which she was chased by rogue leaves through her pristine garden. A few neighbors shot skeptical glances, but most seemed captivated by her storytelling. Things were looking grim. Then, just when all hope seemed lost, Oliver leapt from his chair with a flourish, startling the entire room, including me. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, mimicking Karen's dramatic tone, "before we pass judgment, I believe you should see this." Confusion rippled through the crowd as Oliver strode to the front, plugging his phone into the community room's aging projector. After a few moments of awkward troubleshooting, he pressed play. The screen flickered to life, revealing security footage from multiple homes. Gasps filled the room. The footage showed Karen herself, orchestrating leaf-related sabotage long before our so-called attack. Clip after clip played, capturing her gleefully directing landscapers to strategically dump leaves onto Mr. Carter's rose bushes. Another showed her in a bathrobe and slippers, casually emptying bags of leaves into Tina's dog park, where delighted dogs proceeded to joyfully scatter them everywhere. Laughter erupted. Karen's face twisted from smug superiority to sheer panic. Desperate, she lunged toward the projector in an attempt to shut it off, but Oliver stepped in front of her, blocking her path like a true hero. "Let the truth be known," he proclaimed, arms outstretched in defiance. The room turned against Karen in an instant. Whispers of outrage spread as neighbors exchanged stunned looks. The judgmental stares that had been fixed on us shifted squarely onto her. Her meticulously crafted image of HOA supremacy was crumbling. The unraveling was spectacular. Mrs. Pepperton's knitting needles froze mid-stitch. Rose, ever the gentle soul, slowly turned to Karen, her kindly expression now stern with disappointment. "Karen," she said firmly, "this behavior is highly unbecoming. For someone so quick to enforce rules on others, you've shown shocking disrespect for community standards yourself." A ripple of murmured agreement spread through the room. Neighbors nodded, arms crossed in righteous solidarity. Karen's desperate pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears. The tide had turned. The neighborhood, once silently divided, now stood united against her. After the meeting adjourned, Oliver and I were swarmed. Neighbors offered supportive shoulder pats, sly smiles, and congratulatory smirks. We were no longer the pranksters, we were heroes. Mrs. Pepperton even winked conspiratorially, whispering, "I never trusted that woman's obsession with yard work. Leaves are supposed to be fun, not weaponized." Tina laughed, inviting us to her next barbecue and promising extra burgers in honor of liberating her pup's reputation. Even Mr. Thompson, grumpy, flashlight-wielding, ever-vigilant Mr. Thompson, grudgingly admitted that our prank had uncovered deeper, unspoken tensions in the community. Victory, however, came with a price. Karen, publicly humiliated, vanished into her home, plotting revenge behind tightly drawn blinds. Days later, Oliver called me to the window, frantic. "Look," he hissed. Karen had installed sprinklers. Not just any sprinklers, absurdly powerful, militarized water cannons aimed directly at my front walkway. The moment my mailman stepped near the yard, a geyser exploded, soaking him head to toe. Oliver doubled over laughing. "She's serious now," he wheezed. And she was, because the water attack was just the beginning. Within days, Karen had somehow lured an entire flock of obnoxious birds into my yard, strategically sprinkling birdseed and breadcrumbs across my windowsills. My mornings were now soundtracked by the screeching, chirping chaos of aerial lunacy. Sleep became a myth. I started dreaming in feathers. The feud had officially gone nuclear, but something unexpected happened. The more outrageous Karen's retaliation became, the more the neighborhood rallied around us. Her tyranny had transformed us from a couple of leaf-slinging rogues into community icons. Mrs. Pepperton began slipping me handwritten revenge tips, gleaned from what she claimed were decades of light mischief. Ben, the quiet guy from down the street, started planting sarcastic signs mocking Karen's yard rules, complete with HOA legal font. Tina unleashed her overexcited dog into Karen's obsessively manicured flower beds, loudly declaring innocence whenever questioned. One night, neighbors spontaneously gathered at Oliver's place. Snacks appeared. Someone brought wine. Someone else made t-shirts. By the time the night ended, we had unofficially formed the Anti-Karen Alliance. Laughter echoed through Oliver's kitchen. For the first time, I felt it real community. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were a team. And yet, something tugged at my conscience. Had we pushed her too far? Was this still playful revenge? Or had it turned into something darker? Sensing my unease, Oliver gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Relax," he said with a grin. "She started this. We're just defending our honor. And our yards." I tried to smile, but something didn't sit right. Karen's sudden silence wasn't comforting. It was ominous. Sure enough, my phone buzzed with a text. Just 4 words, but they chilled me to the core. "You haven't seen anything yet." I looked at Oliver, who was both thrilled and mildly concerned. The neighborhood war had evolved into something far more unpredictable. Karen was no longer just a passive-aggressive nuisance. She was an adversary with a vendetta. Then it began. Silence. Not the peaceful kind that drapes over a neighborhood at dusk, but the tense, holding its breath kind. For 2 whole days, Karen vanished. No HOA emails. No glaring from the porch. No 6:30 a.m. trash can deployment drills. Her sprinklers were off. Her birds were gone. It should have been a relief. It wasn't. I paced my kitchen like a man awaiting doom. Oliver, usually thrilled by neighborhood theatrics, had grown deeply suspicious. He stood by my window, peering through binoculars with the focus of a Cold War spy. "This is the calm before the storm," he muttered, scribbling into a leather-bound notebook titled Leaf War Chronicles, Volume 2. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or barricade the doors. Then, just as we started to hope it was over, Karen struck again. But this time, no leaves. No sprinklers. No birds. This time, she sent an invitation. A sleek, embossed envelope was slid under my door with surgical precision. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a formal invitation to a neighborhood peace brunch, hosted by none other than Karen herself. No threats. No snide remarks. Just one polite but chilling note at the bottom, in small print. Attendance expected. My gut twisted. This wasn't an olive branch. It was bait. Oliver, of course, was ecstatic. "This is it," he said, bouncing on his heels. "This is how all great story arcs resolve." I wasn't so sure. The war had entered its next phase. And brunch had never felt so dangerous. Enemies forced into the same room. Someone was bound to cry. There might even be kitsch. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go. If nothing else, it was a chance to put an end to the madness before things escalated to flamingo lawn infestations or full-scale property sabotage. Sunday morning arrived like the final scene of a sitcom. I dressed cautiously, choosing neutral tones, as if that would somehow signal peace. Oliver, on the other hand, wore a shirt that read Tactical Brunch Unit and had a GoPro in his pocket, just in case history needed documenting. We approached Karen's house with the hesitancy of soldiers walking into enemy territory. To our surprise, the front door opened not to Karen's usual battle-ready scowl, but to a strangely warm atmosphere. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air. Soft music played in the background. Karen stood in the entryway, dressed in a muted sweater and jeans. Not the smug, weaponized smile we were used to, just a quiet, tired expression. She gestured for us to come inside with practiced politeness. Several neighbors were already there, exchanging awkward pleasantries, as if we had all stumbled into a parallel dimension where HOA disputes ended with pastries instead of subpoenas. Oliver kept glancing around like he expected hidden cameras to reveal we were on some elaborate prank show. But Karen remained calm, composed, almost genuine. We sat. We sipped coffee. We chewed through stilted small talk. Then, finally, Karen stood. She cleared her throat. Not in her usual prepare-to-be-scolded way, but like someone who had rehearsed a difficult truth 100 times before saying it aloud. "I owe you all an apology." The room went still. Even Oliver, mid-sip, froze. Karen took a deep breath. "I realize now I've been overbearing." controlling even. I got so caught up in keeping the neighborhood perfect that I forgot perfection doesn't matter as much as people. Her gaze landed on me, just for a moment, especially when it costs friendships or causes stress. It was like watching a live exorcism. Was this the same woman who had tried to summon geese into my backyard using cracked corn and YouTube bird calls? The same woman who once made a PowerPoint presentation on the dangers of mismatched Christmas lights? But she kept going, and for the first time her voice sounded real. Her life, she explained, had gotten quieter over the past year. Her kids had moved out. Her husband traveled constantly. The house felt empty, so she filled it with structure, with rules, with control. The more chaotic the world felt, the more tightly she gripped the little things she could control, like leaves in someone else's yard. To be honest, it was hard not to feel a little sympathy. Not enough to forget the sprinkler ambush or the surprise leaf avalanches, but enough to understand where it all came from. The neighbors murmured, offering small smiles and nods. Karen smiled back. This time it didn't look powered by ego. After the brunch, something strange started happening. Karen changed. She showed up to Tina's dog adoption fundraiser with homemade cookies. She helped Ben repaint his fence. She even stopped by my house one afternoon, awkwardly offering extra mulch from her garden as a peace offering. I accepted. It was weird, but not unwelcome. To reset the neighborhood vibe, we decided to hold a community cleanup the following weekend. Karen was the first to arrive, dressed in old jeans and a hoodie. She shoveled, raked, and even replanted flowers with surprising enthusiasm. But the weirdest moment came when Oliver challenged her to a friendly leaf-blowing competition. She smirked and agreed. The two of them stood back to back like duelists in an old western. On Oliver's signal, they turned and blasted leaves into the air, sending golden and crimson bursts swirling as the neighbors cheered. I never thought I'd live to see the day when Karen wielded a leaf blower without trying to psychologically ruin someone. For a while, it seemed like our suburban saga had reached its neat, sitcom-style resolution. And then, the universe reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. A week after the cleanup, I stepped outside to find a perfectly shaped pile of leaves in my yard, not scattered naturally by the wind, not haphazardly kicked into place. A deliberate, precise triangle-shaped pile. I looked up. Across the street, Karen was watering her roses. She caught my eye, gave me the tiniest wave, and flashed the faintest, most knowing smile. Then she turned back to her plants. I stared at the pile. It wasn't an act of war. It wasn't even a prank. Felt like a calling card. A leaf shaped just so. A reminder. I'm still here. Part of me rolled my eyes. Part of me smiled. Karen would always be Karen, even in truce. As I raked up the leaves, Oliver strolled over, handing me a coffee. "So," he said casually, taking a sip, "you think we're officially at peace now?" I looked at the coffee, then at the pile, then back at Oliver. "I think we're in a ceasefire," I said. "A very fragile one." He nodded thoughtfully. "Better keep the leaf blower charged." And I did, because peace in suburbia is never permanent. Not when autumn comes every year. Not when egos are trimmed like hedges. And definitely not when Karen lives across the street.